Are we awake now? Okay. No, you're doing great, hon. You're doing great. Okay, so we're going to be in Revelation chapter 3. But before we start digging into today's study, I'm going to jump forward a few weeks on y'all. So 3 weeks from today, I'm going to be gone. Kat and I will both be gone. Brandon Roth is going to be preaching that Sunday. And during Sunday school, I've talked with Chafin. Chafin's going to be sharing with you all about his trip to Uganda and the school that he worked with there. And I'm very excited for you guys to get to hear from him about what's going on the other side of the world. It's awful easy for us here in central Kansas, to think that everything looks like what we're seeing all the time. So it'll be good to hear from him and to hear about, what all is happening, how God may be working and moving in some areas, but also about the needs. And maybe, I'm hoping that as I'm able to visit with Chafin about different things that he saw, I'm sure that some of my assumptions about what's happening around the world are going to be challenged. And I imagine that yours will be as well. So just want to give you a commercial for that so that you all can be looking forward to hearing from him in a few weeks. So last week, we started out our study time talking about anti-Semitism. If you guys remember, we're going to try to get our heads back there in that same kind of a spot, talking about persecutions that have happened to the Jews, both recently and historically. One of the things that we talked about last week is that when we talk about persecution of the Hebrew people, we can go all the way back to very easily, all the way back to when the Israelites were slaves in Egypt. And from then on, there's just been continual persecution at different times and in different ways against God's people. Now, one of the reasons, though, that we can track that is, we have a specific recorded history of that group of people in the Bible. That's helpful. But secondly, we have a group of people that have maintained an identity throughout 3,000 years plus. And so that gives us an understanding of that as well. But today, as we get started, I want to talk about persecution that we might have seen in the news or wherever. Where do you see or hear, hopefully after last week's talk about this, maybe you started to catch your eye a little bit as you're listening to the news or whatever. Where are you seeing persecution of the Jews today? Anybody catching anything recently?
New York.
Well, New York, there's some stuff absolutely that's going on in New York. Some of the universities there. Jim, I see your eyes. Where are you hearing about this?
Like Boston protests and a lot of crazy stuff going on.
Yeah. The northeastern USA, there's been a real problem with anti-Semitism recently. Anybody guess why it's prevalent in the northeastern US?
That's where most of them live.
There's a lot of Jews that have settled in that part of the world, exactly. A lot of Jews, especially after World War II, came to Boston, New York, all through that area, established Jewish communities there. We can still see even some very traditional Jewish communities in some of those larger cities. New York City is an easy example, where there are whole neighborhoods that are Jewish, that are still practicing,
The long braid.
Yeah, some of those.
Flat hat.
Yeah, some of those things. So that's one of the reasons that it's happening there. Anybody seen anything else here recently?
Well, I guess we were going for a walk at a local park, and there was some graffiti that someone had written about stay out of Gaza, sort of a thing, like get out of there. And it was just a couple blocks from a synagogue. And it just really surprised me. And only now that you've brought this up has it brought it back to mind. But
Yeah, and so this would have been in Manhattan. So just right down the road from us. By the way, that whole chant, I'll come back to you in just a minute, Jim. That whole chant, from the river to the sea, Palestine should be free, that is a call to wipe out the Jewish nation. And we need to realize that, because from the river, from the Jordan River to the Mediterranean Sea, that is where Israel is as a nation. And so if you're going to make all of that into a Palestinian region, you are, by the nature of the case, saying wipe out Israel. So, yeah, Jim?
Yeah, I love the Gays for Palestine movement. I encourage them to go over there.
Yeah. And for those of you who haven't caught this, what this is we've got a lot of liberalism tends to not think through their arguments many times. So the group that would be chanting gays for Palestine, the Palestinians are one of the most intolerant groups of people in the world. And for those who practice, shall we say, non-traditional family styles, there is just no tolerance for that. They will typically kill anybody. Israel, by the way, okay, now I'm not bragging on this. This is not something I'm necessarily proud of, but Israel is one of the most progressive, tolerant places in the whole world. When we were in Tel Aviv, Israel, is one of the most accepting places in the world of alternative lifestyles. And you can fill in the blank with what those alternative lifestyles might be. So it's just very inconsistent when we have this idea of gays for Palestine. So, yeah, so there are some real tangible examples, though, of anti-Semitism, persecution of Jews that are going on in our world right now. Now what we're going to do is we're going to take a minute, we're going to flip the script, okay? So in the book of Acts, we see a huge problem with Jewish persecution. Okay, anti-Semitism is about persecution of Jews. The book of Acts, we have a huge problem with Jews persecuting Christians. Okay, so we need to do a little bit of study here in the book of Acts, but before we go there, let's just read once again. We're still studying about the church in Philadelphia. So we're going to start here in Revelation chapter 3, beginning at verse 7. And someone just read for me, please, verses 7 through 13, please.
The angel of the church in Philadelphia writes, "These are the words of him who is holy and true, who holds the key of David. What he opens, no one can shut. What he shuts, no one can open."
Go all the way through 13, if you would.
"I know your deeds. See, I have placed before you an open door that no one can shut. I know that you have little strength, yet you have kept my word and have not denied my name. I will make those who are of the synagogue of Satan, who claim to be Jews, though they are not, but are liars. I will make them come and fall down at your feet and acknowledge that I have loved you. Since you have kept my command to endure patiently, I will also keep you from the hour of trial that is going to come upon the whole world, to test those who live on the earth. I am coming soon. Hold on to what you have, so that no one will take your crown. Him who overcomes will make a pillar in the temple of God. Never again will he leave it. I will write on him the name of my God, and the name of the city of God, the New Jerusalem, which is coming down out of heaven from my God. And I will also write on him my new name. He who has an ear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches."
Awesome. Thank you so much. We're going to be looking in particular here, starting off in verse 9 there. "Behold, I will cause those of the synagogue of Satan who claim to be Jews, but are not." We're going to look at that idea here first real quick. So anti-Semitism's been a problem throughout history. But when we started to see after Jesus' death and resurrection, when we start to see the church arising and growing, there arose a persecution of the church from the Jews. We're going to take a few minutes and look at that here. So in the book of Acts, so maybe keep a bookmark there in Revelation chapter 3, because we will be coming back here. But we're going to go back to the book of Acts. We're going to look at Acts chapter 4, Acts chapter 6, Acts chapter 8, and Acts chapter 14. And we're just going to take a quick look, 4 quick instances, and we're not going to get the whole story in these situations, but look at 4 quick instances where the Jews were very deliberately going out and persecuting Christians. So in Acts chapter 4, Peter and John have gone to the temple. There was a lame man. This lame man was healed by the power of Jesus. And now everybody has realized, holy cow, something happened to this lame man, because we all knew him. We've seen him here for a long time. And so in Acts chapter 4, after the healing of this lame man, this is the response of the Jewish leaders. I need verses 1 through 4 of Acts chapter 4. If someone would read that for me, please.
And as they spake unto the people, the priests and the captain of the temple and the Sadducees came upon them, being grieved that they taught the people and preached through Jesus the resurrection from the dead. And they laid hands on them and put them in hold until the next day, for it was now eventide. Howbeit, many of them which heard the word believed, and the number of the men was about 5,000.
Okay, so we've got the church is growing. About how many Christians do we have at this point? About 5,000 men. So that's probably not counting women and children. So we probably got somewhere around 10,000 Christians at this point in time. But this passage specifically points out a group called the Sadducees. Okay? And one of the key things that we need to remember about the Sadducees is they did not believe in the resurrection of the dead. There was only this life. That's all we get. So there's no resurrection. That's why they're sad, you see. Okay? So no resurrection of the dead. So Peter and John had been preaching, and what are they preaching about Jesus?
He rose from the dead.
That he rose from the dead. Exactly. So we don't want that. If we're the people in power, the Sadducees, who were the religious leaders of that day, by the way, the high priest was a Sadducee. Annas, Caiaphas, both of them are Sadducees. And so when Peter and John are preaching about resurrection of the dead, nope, can't have that. So what do they do to Peter and John? Throw them in jail. And then later in the story, if we read that far, they let them out, but they warn them, don't do it again. And Peter and John go out and they keep preaching, whether it's right to obey God or man, you tell us, and so on. So, no analysis. Let's keep going forward. Chapter 6, verses 8 through 14. This is when the church has been growing. We've got the church growing to an extent that they need some extra helpers, so they appoint 7 young men who are great servants. One of them is a guy named Stephen. And Stephen is going out and he's preaching and he's proclaiming the good news about Jesus so well that people are coming to follow Jesus, but that's making people mad. So chapter 6, verses 8 through 14, somebody please.
Now Stephen, a man full of God's grace and power, did great wonders and miraculous signs among the people. Opposition arose, however, from members of the synagogue of the freedmen, as it was called, Jews of Cyrene and Alexandria, as well as the provinces of Cilicia and Asia. These men began to argue with Stephen, but they could not stand up against his wisdom or the spirit by whom he spoke. Then they secretly persuaded some men to say, "We have heard Stephen speak words of blasphemy against Moses and against God." So they stirred up the people and the elders and the teachers of the law. They seized Stephen and brought him before the Sanhedrin. They produced false witnesses who testified, This fellow never stops speaking against this holy place and against the law. For we have heard him say that this Jesus of Nazareth will destroy this place and change the customs Moses handed down to us.
Ooh, important. Change the customs. All right. By the way, a key thing that Shaphan was reading about there was a group called the Sanhedrin. The Sanhedrin was the Jewish ruling council. It was made up of Sadducees and another group called Pharisees. And key leaders from both groups came together. They had this council that essentially had some governing authority, at least, over the Jewish people in general. But to get a charge against Stephen, how were they able to come up with a good charge against Stephen?
Produce false witnesses.
False witnesses. Yeah, they had to have false testimony in order to find a way to persecute Stephen. All right, let's just keep going. Acts chapter 8. Acts chapter 8. This is after Stephen is stoned, and just verses 1 through 3. This is what happens in the aftermath of Stephen's stoning.
On that day, a great persecution broke out against the church of Jerusalem, and all except the apostles were scattered throughout Judea and Samaria. Godly men buried Stephen and mourned deeply for him. But Saul began to destroy the church. Going from house to house, he dragged off men and women and put them in prison.
Okay, so we see a change happen at this point in the persecution of the early church. We go from Peter and John, who were thrown into prison. How long did they stay in prison? Anybody remember that from Acts chapter 4 after they healed the lame man? Overnight. They were just thrown in prison overnight, and then they were warned, don't you be preaching about this Jesus anymore. 5,000 people have come to Jesus, but okay, you know. So they're warned, and it's kind of, we get that old idea of, don't do that again. Because if you do it again, I'm going to tell you again not to do it again. You know, but now we've gotten to the point where we're ready to do something about it. So they stoned Stephen, and now they're going, and Saul has authority to go, and he's going into people's houses. And he's dragging men and women out of their homes, even in the middle of the night, and throwing them in jail. We even get evidence that he is probably orchestrating the execution of some of these folks. So the persecution has gone from threats to very definite action at this point in time. Now, Acts chapter 14. At this point, this is after Saul has been converted. He's become a Christian. He is now preaching the gospel, and in Acts chapter 14, he's on his first missionary journey. He's been preaching throughout what is now Asia Minor, through Turkey, through a few towns, and as he is preaching, he's making the Jews mad everywhere that he goes. In Acts chapter 14, verse 19, this all kind of comes to a head. So somebody read verse 19 there for me.
Then Jews from Antioch and Iconium came there, and having persuaded the multitudes, they stoned Paul and dragged him out of the city, supposing him to be dead.
So Saul has become Paul, stoned. This is rocks, not like high, okay? So stoned and left for dead at this point. Now here's the question, and this is a chance for you all to share your thoughts here, okay? Why would the Jews be so upset about people becoming Christians? And why do the Christians have anything to fear from the Jews? Because the Jews aren't in charge of anything. You know, the Roman government, they're the ones who are really in charge. So why do you think there's this enmity and this fighting? And why worry about the other side? Who cares what the Jews think? Go ahead, Rose.
I think lot of it relates to money.
Okay.
Because if Jews are being converted to Christianity, then they're no longer being part of as many things in the temple, and
Okay.
there's less money coming in from them for certain religious
Okay.
things going on there. And even just looking at your board, the false testimony, people are getting paid to be lying about different things, and I just feel like a lot of it might be monetary.
Okay, financial, political. Yeah, go ahead, Lyd.
Wasn't there a law under the Roman law that there could not be a new religion that came about? And so there would be strife between the Jews and the Christians, because the Christians would say, this isn't a new religion, this is a completion of the Jewish religion. We're not new. And the Jews were saying, no, this is not our Jewish religion.
This is a big part of what's going on. This is why the Christians had to fear the Jews. Okay? The Romans, do the Romans care if there's some new sect of Judaism? Yeah, you're shaking your head. And the look on your face says it exactly right. They don't care about anything. They're the Romans. What do the Romans care about? Peace, Pax Romana, absolutely. They care about Rome. What else do they care about? Money. So as long as people are paying their taxes, as long as everybody's being peaceful, it was a big deal under Roman rule to keep the peace. You didn't want riots, because what happens when there's riots? You have to send soldiers in, and that's expensive. That's part of what you don't want. Also, if you're the emperor, why don't you want riots?
You could die.
Because you could die. It is very selfish. They are totally about self-preservation. But yeah, if you have riots going on, things are out of control. And if things are out of control, then things happen that are unexpected. And, you know, how many assassins have to succeed? Just one. There could be 1,000 assassination attempts that fail. If you have one that succeeds, they win. You know, so the Romans, though, they don't care about the Jews. Actually, the Romans despise the Jews. Okay? But the Jews, the argument that the Jews made again and again throughout the book of Acts is that Christianity is trying to start a new religion, and it was against the law to have a new religion. And Christians, again and again, Paul in particular, Saul, who was later called Paul, says, no, this is not a new religion. This is the fulfillment of what Judaism is. Now, for someone who's enmeshed in Judaism, that idea is offensive. Okay? And to understand this a little bit better, we've got to realize, okay, the Sadducees in particular. I wrote them up here nice and big, because the Sadducees are political Jews. The Sadducees are Jews in the sense of, that's my culture. But they are not Jews in the sense of, I'm trusting in God. They are not Jews in the sense of, I'm awaiting the Messiah. They have given up on the idea of the Messiah. Where is their hope for the future? That's a great answer right there. Audrey was just like, you know, what? I don't know. And that's right. They really didn't have any hope. They had no hope in the resurrection. They have no hope for a Messiah coming. So what do you have to do if you have no hope? If I've got nothing in the future to look forward to, what should I do?
YOLO.
What?
YOLO.
YOLO? What does that mean, Lydia?
You only live once.
You only live once. And if you believe in you only live once, what do?
Drink and
Eat, drink, and be merry. Make the most of what you got right now. And so the Sadducees had a lot of political power right now. They were running Judaism in that day. And in that sense, then, what are they going to do? Well, they're not motivated to change anything very much. They've got the power, so where do they live? Big house. What do they eat?
Good stuff.
Good food. Yeah. So they were not motivated to seek any change, to try to make anything positive happen. So they are willing to do whatever they can to preserve their position of power, their position of leadership. And so for the early Christians, when they would come up in contention, shall we say, against the Sadducees, these were not people that shared much in common with them at all. So these persecutions from the Sadducees against the Christians, where the Sadducees have nothing to lose. If they're killing Christians, who cares? If the Christians all get run out of town, who cares? And so in Revelation chapter 3, so let's go back there. We've just set our context. That's really all that we've done. There, verse 9 in Revelation chapter 3, behold, I will cause those of the synagogue of Satan who say that they are Jews and are not, but lie. Behold, I will make them come and bow down at your feet and to know that I have loved you. Okay, that idea of who call themselves Jews but are not. I'm not saying he's specifically referring to the Sadducees with that, but that very much is a description of the Sadducees. I mean, what is the point of Judaism? What is the point of being an Israelite? What does it mean to call yourself a part of God's people? What do you guys think? What would that mean for those folks?
That the Messiah would come through those people.
Okay, that they are a chosen people, that there is a promise to them. What else?
Their lives should look different.
Okay, they're supposed to be a set-apart people, a holy nation. What else? What else about the Jews in particular, the Israelites? Any other ideas? Okay, so we've got a people who have a promise. They are descendants of Abraham. What is God's promise to Abraham?
I will bless the nations through you.
Oh, my lands, yes. That the whole world is going to be blessed through your heritage. And I will make you the father of many nations, and your descendants are going to be as numerous as the sands on the seashore. And it's all about promise, promise, promise. Messiah. It's all about promise. Someday, something better. And so for the Sadducees, they have abandoned all that. There's no promise as a Sadducee. Again, it's YOLO. You only live once. Make the most of today, because tomorrow ain't going to get any better. And so it's this sad picture. It's a form of religion, but lacking the power completely. Okay? So when Jesus is talking about these people who call themselves Jews but are not, if we have abandoned the promise that God has given, we can call ourselves whatever we want, but that doesn't mean we are. It's just like Christians today. Christians who are Christians in name only, but they're not anticipating a promise. What's our promise as Christians? Promise of heaven. What else?
Jesus is coming back.
Jesus is coming back. What else?
He'll never leave us. We have the Holy Spirit.
Okay. Yeah. What else? Life is better when we do things God's way. The best way to be a husband and a father is to do it God's way. The best way to be a wife or a mom is to do it God's way. The best way to grow up as a kid is to do it God's way. And we've got all these promises from God. I mean, hey, what's the first commandment with a promise?
Honor your father and mother.
Honor your father and your mother. Exactly. And so we can call ourselves Christians, but if we're not embracing those promises, if that's not what we're living for, then are we really Christians? I mean, I would say we're not. And so when Jesus is talking about people who call themselves Jews but are not, you know, they could have the heritage. They could be able to trace, and by the way, this is for Jews of that day especially, but even today still. One of the keys is being able to trace your family lineage back to Abraham. Okay? The Jews could have been able to trace their family lineage right back to Abraham. You know, does that mean that they're living as Jews? You know, I would say no. And so I think that's what Jesus is referring to here when he talks about people who are a synagogue of Satan, who say that they are Jews and are not, but they are liars, okay? And then what's the second half of that verse then? What's going to happen to all of those who are of this false Judaism?
I will make them come and fall down at your feet and acknowledge that I have loved you.
For everybody who ever longs for vindication, my dear wife. For everybody who wants to see turnabout as fair play, this is one of the most obvious passages. God is going to reveal who is really his at some point in time. And so anyway, hey, I've burned our time completely here today, but thank you all for hanging with me. Let's have a word of prayer as we wrap up, and let's get ready for our worship service. Our Father in heaven, we just thank you for your word. Thank you for the promises that you have given to us. And we will trust in those promises, and we will trust in Jesus as our Savior, looking to you always in Jesus' strong name. Amen.